Hi everyone, I'm Julia Gergely. I'm a reporter with the New York Jewish Week. I want to welcome you all to Behind the Curtain with Yiddish Fiddler, where today we'll be joining several cast members to talk about the process of putting together this fantastic show, which is returning from its 2018 run with the Folksbiene. And on that note, I want to thank the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene for hosting us today and bringing us all together. And then I just want to remind everyone that there will be a Q&A portion towards the end, so you can ask questions in the Q&A chat box, and I will try to get to them towards the end of our interview. So right now we're joined by Staś Kmieć, who is the choreographer and musical stager of Yiddish Fiddler, and who has directed and choreographed multiple productions of Fiddler on the Roof throughout the world. And we are also joined by James Monroe Števko, who is playing the role of Mendel and who is a dancer in the cast and who is also rejoining us from the 2018 run. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So my first question is for Staś. I want to start with you. So can you talk a little bit about how you were first introduced to Fiddler? I know you've worked on a few productions before, and about how the Yiddish version differs from other shows that you've choreographed, as well as how this 2022 version differs from the 2018 version.
Okay, a loaded question. Okay, I first saw Fiddler on the Roof when I was 11 years old, and I saw the film and was just really taken by the power of the culture, the family, and coming from a Polish background, I knew that setting, I knew the rural setting, and so that really spoke to me. And then I just became obsessed with it, and finally got to perform it on multiple productions, clocking in 1,682 performances as a performer, dancer and singer actor. And then I went on as the keeper of the flame, and continued to direct and choreograph productions, being very attentive to the original Jerome Robbins version. Having worked with him and having worked with his keeper of the flame, who passed it on to me, Sammy Dallas Bays. I really understood what the intent and the style and the history of Fiddler was. Bring that over to the 2018 production of it. I was able to do more with it than and bring in a lot of my knowledge of ethnography and folk dance and folk culture into it. And I was told, because I knew there were going to be changes, and this was wanting to be a respectful to the Robbins, but things were going to be changed. And so knowing the show so intimately, I was able to keep it within the style, even though there are many changes into it, and knew the intent. So it was never going to be changing things to be clever, which a lot of the recent revivals did. It was always going to be honoring the tradition, using that word, and respecting the original. So that was wonderful for me, because I was able to play within that style, and do many more things, add many more dance elements to it. I tell the cast that my Russian to Life has about 10 times more dancing than Robbins did. But if he had more time in Detroit and Washington where they were trying out the show, then maybe he would have done those as well. And I'll joke about it that Robbins came to me in a dream, because I really know so much about his style and his focus on what this story was. So that's bringing us now to the current revival. We never thought that this show was going to be the success that it was. I had faith, but also knowing that it was in Yiddish, didn't know. And it was supposed to really be only 2 weeks with a possible extension of 1 week. And we went, a year and a half and had transferred to another space. So it just kept on remounting the way that it was for the most part. And this time we had a chance to explore it a little bit more, to give nuance to the Yiddish, to bring more conversational, real relationships. So it's not like a radical change, but it is more of a focus. And so that's where we are today.
Do you feel like because the show is in Yiddish, the choreography has to communicate emotions in the show differently than it would in the English version?
Oh, yes, I do. Because it is in a foreign language and there are super titles that people can read, but you also want the body language and the connection and the relationship to be very visible. And, you know, people know the story for the most part, people know the story, so they don't have to look at the super titles, but you want to convey that to the audience. And I had many people that said, you know, I didn't even look at super titles because just the way that connection, you know, to them was, you know, I understood exactly what was going on. I just want to pass one more thing on that I relate to the cast. I told them that there is no audience, that this is a community and they're never playing to an audience. There happens to be an audience in the dark, looking through a keyhole and observing a culture they do not know, speaking in a language they definitely, most of them do not know. And I think that aspect of it gave people the chance to feel that they were observing this culture and through that, you know, that fourth wall. And Topol, the wonderful actor who was in the film, had sat next to me at one performance and turned to me and he said, you know, this is a real shtetl. And our show is rather bare bones, you know, in its setting. And I said, really, we don't have anything. He goes, no, it's the connection and it's the people. And so that's exactly what I wanted to convey. So I'm really happy about that.
Yes, definitely. So James, switching to you a little bit, you're playing Mendel, a role that you originated in the 2018 version. So do you mind just telling us who your character is and sort of on that note, what you did to learn about Judaism, what you did to learn about Yiddish culture or shtetl culture to prepare for this role?
Okay, so Mendel is never explicitly named in the script. He is referred to as a rabbi son a couple times, but Staś staged it so that I'm always kind of tagging along with the rabbi. And I think it's pretty clear in this production that me and the rabbi share some sort of relationship. But Mendel, he likes to have random outbursts. He likes to stick to the book. He's a rabbi's son after all. But so I am a goy. And going into this, I wouldn't say I knew much about Judaism, Jewish culture, or Yiddish. But when I was at the callback for the audition, they handed me sides because they were auditioning us with Yiddish also, not just song and dance, but also speaking Yiddish. And I looked at it, and before I said anything, I looked at it and was like, this looks kind of familiar, because I had studied German and also Czech, Slovak, and Russian. So all those languages are part of Yiddish, in addition to Hebrew, Slavic languages and Hebrew. So I was kind of relieved, although I was still very nervous because it's a completely different accent and manner of speaking. So that took a lot of practice and getting used to with a dialect coach. But it was a relief to me because it felt more at home for me than completely foreign. But then on the note of learning about Judaism and Jewish culture, the rest of the cast was really helpful. I was always asking questions to the Jewish people in the cast. And like I said to Mara earlier, I actually signed up for My Jewish Learning emails. And I would get little emails with a little quip, and I would go into rehearsal or the shows and be like, oh, did you know this? And he'd be like, no. And they started saying that I knew more about Judaism than they did. So, I mean, it's an ancient culture, so there's plenty to learn and plenty that some people may never know. So it's always a process.
And Staś, did you choreograph this show to be more Jewish in any way, or the Yiddish version?
Yes, definitely. Coming from a background of ethnography and folk culture, which I have a degree and a master's in Poland on that. I really explored. I met with a rabbi on the top of a very high hill at a synagogue, and discussed a lot of things, and he kind of pointed me in certain directions. So I'd read a lot, I knew a lot, I had absorbed a lot of various dances, and of course the traditions that are in there more than the original. It was always considered that they were being respectful of the culture and putting as many elements as they could. But I've taken it even further. I've included fragments of certain dances, mitzvah tanz and patch tanz for the women, and the Bachin, which is the wedding comic or wedding jester. He is more pronounced in this version. There are just many elements as far as, I'm going to even go to the mezuzah. It was always in the original. The original had a set. They had a house and everything. Ours is very bare bones, so we don't have all of that. And whenever they enter the house, I always have them touch the mezuzah, but there's nothing for them to see because there's no doorway. And that was picked up by the Jewish press. They were definitely, they noticed that all those little elements were in there. Particularly with the dancing, I'm going to mention one thing in particular. In the wedding dances, we only see the men dancing, usually in most productions. And in this one, because of the stanchion separating men and women had their own dances that they did. And so I put in dances that are based on certain dances that women would do at a wedding. And it came to light when we were at our original place at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where at the end of a show, I was in the lobby and I heard that these women want to talk to you. And all of a sudden, these Hasidic women came up to me and I thought, uh-oh, what's here? And they said, we want to thank you. This is the first production that we see the women dancing. So they're actually like looking and seeing those women dance. We dance at weddings. We do our own dances, and they're at, and so I said, okay, I achieved what I wanted to do, was, to be respectful of the culture. So there are many aspects of it that I incorporated in just to give it more richness. And also there's a thought of the universality of the culture being so strong. There are many revivals that choose to de-emphasize the Jewish aspects of it, thinking they're making it more universal, but quite honestly, being very staunch in approaching the culture, that makes it universal because everyone has a culture. So you look at it and you see the Sabbath prayer and you say, oh, we do something like that. You relate it to yourself. When we played El Paso, Texas, we had not this company, I mean, the one that I was with Theodore Bickel. But we were in El Paso and the majority of the audience did not speak English. They spoke Spanish. And that was probably the biggest response because they could relate to the story, they could relate to the tradition, they could relate to holding on to the tradition. And when Fidler was done in Japan, they said, how do Americans understand this? This is our story. It's not, but it is as far as the theme of tradition and family and celebration and love.
Definitely. And do either of you think or feel that doing it in Yiddish connects, even though maybe you won't understand it directly, like how does that bring out those emotions of tradition and of going back to your ancestral roots, even if you aren't Jewish, like James, how you said you're not Jewish, but how does doing the show in Yiddish draw that out even further?
I'm going to give that to James and then I might pop in.
Okay.
So I heard so many times, because we would be out in the lobby on occasion collecting for fundraising, and so many times people would say, it feels like you're transported out of New York City. And that's what I continue to tell people that I think the show really does is the language, like Stasha said many times, we have a pretty bare bones set. There's not much there. And to me, the language really acts as a set piece almost. It transports you to this village. And as someone who is a language hobbyist, I think there's something beautiful about every language. They have their own melodies and sounds, and even ingrained in just the sounds is an entire culture behind it. Like we infuse our culture within our language, and it sets the tone for the entire show, and it affects people, and they say it repeatedly.
It's such a beautiful and colorful language, and it brings actually more to the story. It gives the realism because this is the language that they spoke. And obviously, back in the time that it was done, it wasn't feasible to be doing it in Yiddish. It wasn't commercial to do it in Yiddish. But this brings, I mean, the melody of the language, as James said, you know, it just carries through, and you hear these lines like you've never heard them before. And it's, I mean, it's just so beautiful and nuanced. There are certain words and it carries emotion, not only humor, but also pathos, you know, in the second act, which is very strong. It goes far beyond anything that, and I think James finds that probably as I do in Polish, that the words have so much more meaning. A single word can have so much more meaning than many words in English.
And James, you were just in the Lyric House of Chicago's production, is that correct?
Yes.
So you were just playing the English version of Fiddler with a few of the same castmates. That's right? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
With Stephen and Maya, who we had worked with in 2018.
So how has that switch been, like, mentally, to make the difference between different staging of a production, an English version and not New York, to now switching on a dime?
Yeah, well, I mean, lots of thoughts about that. So I didn't grow up with a huge relationship with Fiddler. I had played it once in 7th grade in like a band medley, but aside from that, I really didn't know Fiddler on the Roof. So when I did the original Yiddish production in 2018, that was really my first interaction with Fiddler on the Roof. And it was all in Yiddish, and that's how I know the show. And going to Chicago, you know, and I had worked with Stephen. Stephen is fabulous. I love him as an actor on stage and off. I heard him speaking the lines.
And just for the audience,
not the same.
Stephen
I don't
is,
like it.
sorry, just for the audience. Yeah.
Or Tevye. I just heard him and like, I don't think this has the same impact for me.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Not to say that the production wasn't great. I was worried, as you mentioned, about, oh my God, all the choreography I already know. You know, strangely enough, that was not an issue. It was almost like I had a box of Yiddish Fiddler stuff over here, and then I opened up this new box of English Fiddler stuff. The choreography was really wild and different and contemporary, but it came to me, you know, after rehearsal. The one thing that did give me anxiety and made me sweat was hearing the music and musical cues that I had before, and I'd hear it over the speaker and be like, oh my God, I need to be somewhere. Except it was completely different. So in that way, it was really cool to do another production, because especially now that I've returned to Yiddish Fiddler, it was something new and fresh. It was a new experience. That was my 8th show at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So it was like going home. I'm also from Chicago, so my family could come see it. So there are a lot of really great things about it, but I think Yiddish Fiddler will always be the #1 in my heart.
So the 2018 version, I mean, it was a smash success, I think, throughout New York. That was a bit unexpected. And now I'm hearing you say, like, the cast had some sort of magic community that you created. Can you guys talk a little bit more how it feels to reunite so much of the cast to bring it back in 2022? And just like when you stepped into rehearsal the very first day, what did it feel like?
You want to go?
I'll go, sure. You know, when we assembled this cast, it was a very unique cast, because it was a cast that wanted to come and do this short run of a production and learn Yiddish, and commit to that. I mean, we have many actors that would be approached and they would say, yeah, no, not the Yiddish. I can't do the Yiddish. So it was a unique person. It was a as opposed to a triple threat, it was a quadruple threat. And where we hired some dancers, the majority of the cast also had to dance. And so they needed to dance as villagers, as members of the shtetl. Revisiting all these people from that unique bond and that connection, that I think it's the Yiddish that really drew everyone together, because it was the common line of the production that just gave us something that I think other casts don't have, this incredible bond. It was interesting to see people who have done it before, and then with a few, 4 people that hadn't done it before, how we were able to integrate them into this family that we had, and then also observe some of the things that had evolved or morphed over time, and address those. Now I'm gonna give it to James, because he's more connected, because I'm there, but a little in a different position. And so James, let us know your feeling.
Yeah, like you said, I don't know how to refer to it. Like the Yiddish itself, when we first started rehearsal, it was almost like we were bonding over a common enemy. That wasn't the case. It wasn't an enemy, but that was the feeling. We all entered rehearsal originally like, and we had the first read through, not knowing what was going on, what we were saying. And then I remember that lunch being like, what are we doing? How are we going to do this? And so that was really the building block of our relationship with the entire cast. And so coming back to see everyone unexpectedly again in 2022, I don't think anyone expected that we would be doing this again like this. And so it was just a blessing on our heads.
Definitely. Great reference. I think we're about to wrap up with our first section. I want to just remind the audience that you can ask questions in the chat function, and Mara will feed them to me. But you guys are entering your 3 days of tech and your last week of rehearsal before you open. What are you most looking forward to as you open, and how are you feeling in this last week of rehearsals? We can start with Staś, and then James can also answer.
Well, I think it's reassembling the show, because we obviously have it to a point in the rehearsal studios. So now bringing in all the elements of set, costumes, light, sound, and after 3 days of basically dissecting and taking the show apart, we get to put it back up, and then it becomes a glorious thing. I'm quickly going to say on the Yiddish aspect of that, the first performance that we did, which was a preview performance of the initial run, it was so focused because everyone was so attentive to the Yiddish that it was just a sublime experience that they, what they did. And by the way, we do balance our own bottles. Unlike, there are no tricks. My dancers balance their bottles. The last 2 revivals didn't, but we do. So I just wanted to add that in. James.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited because I really like the entire cast. So it's just going to be great to be in shows with them again, backstage, in the dressing room. In a way, it's like we call ourselves a mishpocha, which means family. And in that way, it really is like one, because, we don't always get along, but for the most part, we love everyone. It's going to be great to be back with them for 7 weeks at New World Stages in a new space. I think everyone's really excited.
And good luck.
And there are some changes in the show, so it's worth seeing again.
Yes, definitely, for people who have already seen the Yiddish version and maybe the English version, if you're following every version of Fidler, what can they expect to be different or exciting in this new production?
Well, for me as a performer, 3 years have passed since we've done this. So us ourselves have changed. And as an actor, that has an effect. And I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think everyone across the board will feel that way. We're not the same person doing the show we were back in 2018. And that has an effect on the characters we portray. And how we feel about our characters, how we feel about the setting or what's going on in current times.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. I think if we have time for you guys to answer, and then I'll also ask the three women that are joining us in just a few minutes, but current events, I know with the Ukrainian refugee crisis and Anatevka, the fictional town that Fidler is set in, is in Ukraine. Is that something you've discussed as a cast or kept in mind? What you've learned or felt from the impact of the world's current events on portraying the events of Fiddler on the Roof? How does it change how you think about the show?
Well, it brings it to light that this is still happening, which I think many people just thought, oh, that was something that happened at one time, and then again during World War II, but it's now current. And as you said, Anatevka, when Shalom Aleichem wrote it, was set in Ukraine. And when they did the Broadway show, it was that whole time of communism and all that. So Russians were more the consideration at that time. It's oppressive, taking a culture and feeling that they don't exist. It's all of it's being repeated again. So it's very prominent, not only in our production before, but even more so now.
Definitely. Well, I think the audience question I've received so far is people would like to know if there are talks of a national tour upcoming. I know there was a plan for a national tour before COVID sort of stopped everything in 2020. I don't know if you have any insight into that.
So I probably have the most insight into that. And that is our plan. It was before COVID. That was definitely our plan. We have a lot of interest, but there's more like in select markets because of our type of show and the Yiddish. This is sort of a springboard for us as well to bring Fiddler back into the public eye. We had a China tour that we were supposed to do as well, and that abruptly ended. And then we also had a separate company that was going to be at the Sydney Opera House with Opera Australia. So people saw it and they loved it and they wanted it. I'm not going to go into the cities that express that. And so now this is to bring it back and to let people know we're here, and a springboard to continue and bring our message and our story elsewhere.
Well, I think based on the questions and the audience participation here, people are definitely interested and excited, especially those that don't live in New York and won't have the opportunity to see it.
Great. We look forward to bringing it to you.
I want to thank you both so much for joining me, and good luck in tech rehearsals later today and tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
And now I'm going to sort of switch gears. Hopefully Mara can spotlight our three other women that are joining us: Rachel, Rosie Jo, and Jodi. If they're here, I'm going to give them a minute to join. Welcome.
And I'm going to mute it. Let's see.
Amazing. Okay, so thank you all three for joining us. We are behind the curtains of Yiddish Fiddler, and I'm Julia Gergely, a reporter for the New York Jewish Week. And now for the second half of our program today, we'll be talking with Rachel Zatcoff, who is playing Seidel, Tevye's oldest daughter, Rosie Jo Neddy, who is playing Chava, the third oldest daughter, and Jodi Snyder, who is playing Fruma Sarah, the ghost of Laser Wolf's wife, who appears to Tevye in a dream sequence. Welcome to all three of you. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Hi, Julia.
Hi. So all three of you are reprising your roles from the 2018 run of Yiddish Fiddler. So how does it feel to be back together and back in character, starting rehearsals recently?
It's been so much fun just getting to see everybody every day, seeing all these fun, familiar faces. We're such a family, and it's so nice to just be back in the room, working hard on this piece that we all love so much.
Yeah, everyone's been really excited. It's just the energy is high and the focus is intense and in a good way. And yeah, it's just so great to see everybody again.
So we were talking a little bit with Staś and James about what it's like to learn Yiddish for the show. I know all three of you have significant talking portions and singing portions of the show. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit more. Maybe we'll start with Rachel and then Rosie Jo and Jodi can answer too. But what did it take to learn Yiddish? Did any of you guys know Yiddish before? And how long did it take to start feeling comfortable doing an entire performance all in Yiddish?
I had done one other show with the National Yiddish Theater in 2016, the Golden Bride, Die Goldene Kalle. And I entered that production as a replacement. I had 10 days of rehearsal to learn about 100 pages of Yiddish. I had a very fast character-y role. It was the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. So that prepared me for a Yiddish Fiddler because I had already had the experience of having to cram a ton of Yiddish into my brain. And fortunately, many of us, if not all of us, already knew Fiddler on the Roof. We were familiar with the musical, so that definitely helps, I think, in learning something in another language. We had incredible Yiddish coaches, and my personal background is in opera, so I had a lot of experience singing in other languages and learning other languages and diction and the phonetic alphabet and all of that. So that being said, Yiddish is, having sung in many languages, Yiddish was definitely the hardest language I've ever had to commit to memory. It's very challenging, but we had great help.
Yes, this was my first experience with Yiddish. And for a month before rehearsal started in our initial run, I met once or twice a week with Mottel Didner, the associate artistic director of the Folksbiene and the associate director of our show. And he was such a good teacher, very clear, very patient. And he taught me my lines and how, in a broad sense, the language works, the vowels and the consonants and the grammar. I think of it kind of as a backwards course in the language, because of time, we have to start with our lines. Mm-hmm. But if you're learning a language, you don't often start with full advanced sentences. But I had to. And then as the run progressed, I got a Yiddish textbook and I taught myself the days of the week and how to say what time it is and the words for colors, kind of the things you would learn traditionally first when learning a language. And it was a challenge, but I agree with Rachel, knowing the show before entering the original process definitely helped.
So I guess this question is for Jodi and Rachel and Rosie Jo, you can also answer, but did learning Yiddish for the show inspire, or working with the Folksbiene inspire you to look into Yiddish culture or Yiddish literature, or go farther into that direction in a way that you didn't expect before you started? Like what else did you learn that you didn't expect by preparing for the show?
Yeah, so I post working on Fidler with some friends that also had been involved in Fidler. We decided to make a Yiddish all-girl trio and learn more about Yiddish music and sing more Yiddish and spread more Yiddish joy to, people our age, people of all ages, to just to spread that around even more, because we found it to be so much fun, and we wanted to learn more ditties beyond Fiddler on the Roof music. So it definitely, I definitely have been learning more and more every day about Yiddish music through that, and it's been really fun.
They're amazing. They're called the Mamalas. They're so good.
Mamalas. Yes, check them out. They're fantastic.
And so that trio is with two other members of the 2018 cast, and you guys sing Yiddish songs together.
Yep, we sing Yiddish songs together. We have a music video on YouTube, a Bigazent, and where we perform at different festivals and things. And it was something that really was sparked out of meeting each other through Fidler and just really getting into Yiddish and loving singing it so much.
So I want to ask, so I guess I'll start with like what your guys' Jewish background is, not necessarily Yiddish, and if being in Fidler helped you connect to the Jewish roots of the show or your personal Jewish roots, and what you did to prepare in that way outside of the Yiddish part of the show.
I was actually raised, my mother was Italian, is Italian and was raised Catholic. She's no longer Catholic, but that's a whole other story. My dad is Jewish, and I was raised Christian, actually, but celebrated Jewish holidays with my Jewish side of the family. And then I ended up later on converting to Judaism. My husband is Jewish, and he grew up conservative Jewish household, and I always felt really connected to my Jewish faith growing up, and I also loved Fiddler on the Roof from a very, very young age. Like, was totally obsessed with the movie and watched it all the time. And I think that the show being in Yiddish, being in this language that these people would have been speaking, makes everything go into a deeper place for us as performers and for the audience watching our show. Honestly, whether you're Jewish or not, we have many non-Jewish actors in our company, and in our creative process, just in our company as a whole. And we had a ton of non-Jewish audience members, of course, just in a puddle of tears at the end of our production. And I think that's the beauty of Fiddler on the Roof. It is a Jewish story, but so many different people and cultures and religions can relate to it. And I personally, I do feel a real closeness to it, especially in Sabbath prayer. I'll think of my grandparents, and my Jewish grandparents especially would have just absolutely lost their minds over this production, and that I'm a part of it. Neither of them are here, but I think of them all the time because they were also big theater goers, and they would have just been kvelling, and I know that they are. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Rosie Jo or Jodi, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am Jewish. I grew up going to Hebrew school 3 days a week. My family, we consider ourselves to be conservative Jews, and you know, when this production was first coming out, I was getting messages from family members saying, "You have to do this production." I would love to. And it was really crazy that actually worked out. I've had family members fly from everywhere to come see Yiddish Fiddler. It is so special to everyone, people I know, people I don't know, friends of friends of friends, friends of family, everybody. I've brought so many different people backstage to say hi, and it's been incredible to see how this has touched everyone in that way. But yeah, growing up Jewish, it's interesting to see how, you know, my traditions reflect or don't reflect things that happen in the show, and tying that in and what that, you know, means to me in the show. And you know, we have our traditional wedding that happens, and that feels really wonderful because I've been going to so many weddings recently, and seeing the parallels in my life to what happens on stage is really, really special. And then when we step into the language, like Rachel was saying, it's so transformative. You feel you just feel your ancestors around you. I do, at least. I feel that support there, and I think that's something you don't always get in a show. And I think that really elevates that for me. I do feel that. So I feel really, really, really lucky to be a part of it, and to celebrate my culture and my religion on stage and in rehearsal. It feels so special, and I feel so connected.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting parts about Fidler is you feel connected to the people in the shtetl, your great grandparents, your great great grandparents, your Jewish heritage, and then also the people that have been watching the show the last 50 years who have loved it and who it's meant so much to them. And that's a different era of American Judaism, or just American musical theater, that you're continuing this long tradition of, and then now you're bringing it into Yiddish in such a special way. So I think I can only imagine being on stage and being in rehearsal and feeling all those emotions as you put it all together. So I want to ask Rachel and Rosie Jo about what it's like to play Tevye's daughters. I have to admit, I kind of go back and forth with them a little bit because they break his heart, but he forgives them, and I want them to do what they need to do in order to be happy. And I just want to ask, so Rosie Jo, again, you play Chava, and Rachel plays Seidel, the oldest daughter. So what have you learned from your characters? Like, do you find them relatable at all? What do you love about them? What do you wish they did differently sometimes?
Well, I think something I really looked up to in the character of Chava is her bravery and her ability to take the morals that she has been taught by her parents and that sense of what she feels is right and wrong, and apply that to new information that she seeks out and new ideas that she considers, and she tries to marry the two, what she feels is right and what she has been taught. And this might be an unpopular opinion, because you're right, each daughter in her own way breaks Tevye's heart, but I think in the case of Chava, he breaks her heart as well. She just hopes so deeply that he will say, yes, you can still be a part of the family now, and he is unable to. And of course, as an audience member, we understand that decision. But it's really hard, especially because so much of this show is about being part of a family and being part of a community. I don't know, I feel like I learn something from her every time I do the show. And I learn something from the entire company and from the story every time I do the show.
I love that answer, Rosie. Seitel is the first one to, break the tradition, and she's very strong and very confident in her choices. And she is also very vulnerable. And Joel Gray, our director, has taught many of us through our characters and just in life that there is great strength in vulnerability. And also, I will say that playing Tevye's daughter is one thing, but playing Stephen Skybell as Tevye's daughter is another. And he is, the most magnificent actor and human that any of us will probably ever work with. And his Tevye is so complex and multifaceted, and it's not so cut and dry. And so you feel a lot of things when we do go to tell him or ask him or beg or whatever us daughters are all doing in breaking off for love. we're teaching him, and he is, the way he receives that is beautiful and layered, and which makes it beautiful and layered for us. It's really such a gift. And it's wonderful. All of the daughters, in which Jodi is also playing one of our sisters in this run. She is playing Bielka, and us daughters, we have a good, strong unit as well, which is it's just very special.
Yes, I definitely wanted to sort of go in that direction, even though Fidler, like Tevye, is sort of at the core of Fidler. Like that's the first character people will remember. In many ways, it's driven by the women in the show. You have the 5 daughters, you have Golda, the wife, Yenta, the matchmaker, and Fruma Sarah, who's Jodi's other part, the comes from beyond the grave to swarm Tevye. So what has that been like to be in this show where both as actors, like how have you worked together and depended on each other with the other women in the show, and then as characters to sort of pull on those strings a little bit and really like show the audience how much the women are in control of their destiny, or in control of the shtetl, or in control of the family. Anyone can go and jump in if you have an answer.
I feel, at least behind the scenes, especially, we're all really close. We all band together. We all are communicative with each other, and it's a really great workplace culture for women, which is amazing, and which should be, and I hope is, I hope that's the case everywhere. We are all so supportive of each other here. And I think that reflects on stage. And I also think, within the story, we really try to take hold of that power and realize that it's so important to show that women are progressing through this musical. Women are constantly progressing, and we will continue to progress and prevail,
Definitely.
And I think this show really depicts that women progressing breaks down to each individual decision. Each time one of us stands up for ourselves, each time one of us makes a brave choice to do something outside of the norm, we all grow as a group.
Right. It has an effect on everybody. It has an effect on the community, and all different ages as well. I think that's a beautiful and important part of this. It's a different, where we're all at, the daughters, and also our mother Golda and Yenta, and just where everybody's at mentally on all of these topics and things that come up within the show. We're all kind of learning from each other, directly or indirectly.
Yeah, and Fruma Sarah will not take no for an answer. So if that's a strong woman, that's just, that's what it is. You know what I mean? That's
Definitely,
yeah. Dead or alive,
Yes. Yeah. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like. I asked Staś and James this question as well, but what it's like to play, to put on Yiddish Fiddler in this moment with Afn Dakh set in Ukraine, and now we have a new generation of refugees being displaced from Ukraine. Has that changed production at all, or just your own mental state as opposed to doing it in 2018? Has that been something that's come up as a cast or personally that you've thought about? And what have you learned about the world through Fidler?
Do you want to go, Rosie?
No, you can go.
Joel did speak with us this last week about Ukraine, and this is, in telling this story, our duty, and really amazingly, tragically, this story has remained incredibly poignant through its life. Even when we were doing the production back before, there were many things, lots of anti-Semitic things going on in our country, all over. The attack on the Tree of Life synagogue, and many of these things happened while we were doing our show. I mean, we had a show that day, I think, or the next day, and I just remember, you know, just everything just kind of sits in this really deep, real place, and it's hard. Honestly, it's really hard. But that's what our job is as actors, and also that's what art is here for. And it's so beautiful. And I hope that people can find even some comfort in seeing this story be told now. And we had a whole audience of refugees for what was that?
National Refugee Day.
Yeah, National Refugee Day. We filled the audience, our company filled the audience with refugees, and that was incredibly powerful. Yeah, there are so many elements that just make it relevant every day. And it's crazy, actually. It's crazy and scary and beautiful.
Yeah, this play, it hurts how relevant it is. I've been reflecting a lot these past couple weeks in rehearsals on a line Fiat says when he and I are saying goodbye to the family at the end of the show. He tells Tevye and the family that we are also leaving because we can't stand to be around people who do something like this. And he says some people are evicted by a piece of paper, and others by silence, which then had me thinking about the Elie Wiesel quote, neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. And it's just like Rachel said, like, we do art to talk about these things. And I guess I just hope that people walk away remembering that silence hurts and are moved to some action.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And definitely the end of Fiddler, even though it is a joyous show, like it does hit like in a way that makes you really consider your own role in the world and what is still happening. And it's not just 1906. It's, it's 2022 or throughout history. So thank you all for reflecting. I'm going to ask a few audience questions. And again, if you're in the audience and you have a question, either you can personally chat me or you can ask the Q&A function and Mara will feed it to me. But I think a few people are wondering if any of the cast grew up speaking Yiddish or hearing Yiddish, or were you guys kind of all in it together, learning it, and what that felt like? I know I sort of asked that before, but do you know if any of the cast was sort of leading the charge on that?
Yeah, I don't personally speak Yiddish, but I grew up with my, I was really lucky to have a great grandma until I was in high school, and she would throw around Yiddish phrases here and there, and same with my grandma, and sometimes, and my Nana and grandparents, and sometimes, I'll start singing a song and my grandma will try to see if she can translate it, because even she didn't know so much, but her parents did, and so I grew up with that around the house, which was really cool and really fun. And it's fun to like play around with now.
And we currently have a one fluent Yiddish speaker and scholar really in our show, playing Mordka. And we had another fluent, we had a couple other people that were very close to fluent, if not very well versed in the Yiddish language, in our original production. And yeah, everybody's kind of at, I suppose, different levels and awareness of the language. but many of us are just had to learn it for the show. But we had audience members, as just the ultimate compliment, come up to us after the show and just start speaking in Yiddish to us. And we were like, oh no, we don't speak it. We just, so that's just kudos to our Yiddish coaches, honestly, that just were on top of us until we closed, honestly, giving us Yiddish notes. So we were, just all doing our very best to really get it out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the audience reaction the first time. I mean, people loved the show, but how did people feel about the hearing you guys speak Yiddish? Were people saying you were amazing? Were there people saying that's not the Yiddish I know? Like, what was the reactions that you were hearing from the audience? If anyone has.
From what I learned about the language thus far is there are several dialects.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always so cool and such an honor to have Yiddish speakers in the audience, and so exciting to think they could hear the story in their language. And it's just so amazing. And also sometimes their dialect is different from the stage dialect we use, and we would hear about that as well.
Yeah. So do you know which dialect is in the show?
I don't know. There's a name.
I was just talking about this with someone and now I can't remember what it was.
That's okay.
But there is a specific one we're using in the show. I can't remember what it's called, but that's terrible.
No, that's totally okay.
But there were also members of the audience downtown at the museum that would literally yell out the word to us.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, there was a moment where Golda said später, later, später. And someone in the audience went später, like yelled it out at her. So it was a trip actually, because
That's really great.
People
believe
it their way.
I mean, we'll have to see how the having it at New World stages changes reaction, but that's really great. And then someone also asked about the super titles. So if you don't happen to speak Yiddish, what is the experience like for the audience in the translation? If anyone can answer.
It's fantastic. We have the super titles on both sides of the stage projected onto our set in a very clear way in both English and Russian. And it's a really beautiful way to watch and take in a show. You can go to the opera and they do it all different ways. It's either up really high, up above your head, or down. And I really love, some opera companies do it this way as well, but for the most part not. And I actually think it's really nice that it's on the side, because it still gives you the opportunity to feel like you're watching the actors, not just reading the whole time. And it's been a really positive experience, I think, for everybody that comes to see it, even people that are a little reluctant at first, maybe, because they're like, oh, I'm gonna go sit through a 3-hour musical in another language, really, but everybody just leaves loving it. So
people always mention forgetting their subtitles, stopping looking at the subtitles because they don't need the subtitles, or just really just being so involved that it doesn't even faze them.
That's amazing. Well, I think that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank all three of you and also wish you luck in your tech rehearsals that are coming up, that I hear may be grueling, but
we start in an hour. We are going to the theater today. We are going to the theater today for the first time in 1 hour. In 1 hour, I'm going to see these two.
And then you have, so then you hit the stage, and then you're kind of running for the next 2 months. So
indeed.
I want to wish you a lot of luck, and I want to tell the audience, please go see the show if you can. And thank you to the audience for coming. Thank you to the Folksbiene for hosting all of us, and to 70 Faces Media and New York Jewish Week, which I am a writer for bringing us all together today. It was lovely speaking with all three of you, and to Staś and James as well, who I believe James is on his way to the stage, and Staś may still be here. But thank you guys so much. And it was
Thank
great.
you.
So much, Julia.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.